Okay, here we are, folks. I'm here again. This is me, if you can see me, recording another video about you-know-who. And this is a presentation that I made, believe it or not, 2 years ago. 2 years ago I made this. Had some problems with it then, and so I'm going to redo it and post it today. So we'll see how that goes. It's kind of funny that I was thinking in 2 years that Kent's arguments might have changed or whatever, but as usual, he won't change anything, I guess, till after the rapture. So we'll just do this. So, do evolutionists know that the Earth is billions of years old, or do they believe that it is? Dr. Kent Hovind, author of Creation Seminar video series, which he's always trying to hawk to us, says that there are no scientific facts that prove that the Earth is that old. Thus, the belief in an extremely old Earth is part of the religion of evolution and has nothing to do with science. If you've listened to his any of his videos, he's real quick to say religion of evolution. And so what exactly was the beginning? Hovind lists over a dozen scientific facts that all point to a young Earth. Hovind's theory is that God created Earth about 6,000 years ago. So let's look at that a little bit. This is from some links that I found on Google, and I provided those below in the description if you want. You can check my facts. The first thing, I should tell you that the little, you can't see my finger, but the little purple stuff right up here at the top, that is from Kent's theory, and my response is in black. So Kent says the rate of population growth has been steady for some time that we have records. At the present, 6 billion, actually it just became 8 billion, is the right number of people to have multiplied from the 8 survivors of the universal flood about 4,400 years ago. If man had been around for millions of years, the same growth rate would have produced 150,000 people per square inch of land surface. Of course, Kent doesn't have any reference for that. He just made up that number. My response, the rate of population growth is not steady as in linear growth. Population growth is an exponential function. It can be estimated by 3 linear growth percentages. So 7,000 BCE there, to 1 AD, is 0.06. Year 1 to 1500 is 0.5% growth rate. 1900 to 2010 is 1.5%. So 8 to 40 million in 1600 BC is an enormous growth rate. Now, I'm talking about 1600 BC, so that's before Christ. The first 8 people, by the way, are genetically related. Creationists always explain that by saying that because sin hadn't taken over, that their genetic makeup was pure, and so there was no problem with interbreeding. But the problem with all this is that the growth rate is different than a linear, smooth growth rate that Kent thinks. If you go through this estimate, as we've done here in these graphs, you'll see that it's just nearly impossible for 8 individuals to breed enough to make 8 billion by the year 2022. What Dr. Whack-A-Mole doesn't realize also is that Homo sapiens made its appearance about 100,000 years ago, not millions of years ago. So man has not been around millions of years. I would be curious of the equation he used, I mentioned, to get 150,000 per square inch. Somehow he thinks that we have no population or overgrowth problem. He's been to Texas and Nebraska, and he said, there is no problem with population. However, he hasn't apparently been to India, China, or some of those countries where there's, a billion people living in one country. Yes, sir, there is a population problem, and denying it doesn't make it go away. Next, the planets are losing heat. If they had formed millions of years ago, they would have no internal heat left, given the present rate of heat loss. If a hot cup of coffee were left standing for 400 years, it would have no internal heat left. Okay, so first thing, the Earth's internal heat budget is fundamental to the thermal history of the Earth. The flow of heat from the Earth's surface to the interior to the surface is estimated at 47 plus or minus 2 terawatts. And it comes from 2 main sources in roughly equal amounts. Number 1 is radiogenic heat produced by radioactive decay. And the other is the primordial heat left over from the formation of the Earth. So there are 2 sources of heat, not just one. And so the Earth is generating its own heat, plus the fact that heat is being added to the system from the sun. Number 2, the Earth's internal heat powers most geologic processes and drives plate tectonics. Despite its geological significance, this heat energy coming from the Earth's interior is actually 0.03% of the Earth's total energy budget at the surface, which is dominated by 173,000 terawatts of incoming solar radiation. So as I said earlier, so we have 47 terawatts coming from the interior of the Earth, and we have 173,000 terawatts coming from the sun. The insulation that eventually, after reflection, reaches the surface penetrates only tens of centimeters on the daily cycle and only several tens of meters on the annual cycle. This renders solar radiation minimally relevant for internal processes. And here I note that it says it loses approximately 1 degree centigrade per 10 million years. It would take 4 to 5 billion years to lose all of the internal heat. Okay. Global data on heat flow and density are compiled by the IHFC, and there's a website that you can go look at if you have an interest in those things. The next thing, and Kent just made a video about this the other day. The planet Saturn is losing its rings, Kent says. They are slowly moving away. If the planet were millions of years old, the material in the rings would have dissipated long ago. Okay, once again, NASA research confirms that Saturn is losing its iconic rings at the maximum rate estimated from Voyager 1 and 2 observations made decades ago. The rings are being pulled into Saturn by gravity as a dusty rain of ice particles under the influence of Saturn's magnetic field. Okay, so they're not being dissipated, moving away. They're being drawn into the planet, which can be looked up. Number 2, we estimate that this ring rain drains an amount of water products that could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool from Saturn's rings in a half hour, says James O'Donoghue of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. Just from this alone, the entire material detected falling into Saturn's equator and the rings have less than 100 million years to live. This is relatively short compared to Saturn's age of over 4 billion years. O'Donoghue is a leading author of a study on Saturn's rings. Saturn's rings could be as young as 100 million years old. So the rings are not, billions of years old. They only came into existence 100 million years ago. And they still have 100 million years left. So, lots of time left. Okay. Here's another of Kent Hovind's theories. Space dust accumulates on the surface of the moon at a rate of about 1 inch for every 10,000 years. Astronauts found an average of 1/2 inch, just about what you would expect in 6,000 years. Also, another thing that he's teaching about lately, the moon is moving very slowly away from the Earth. If it were millions of years old, it would have had to start very close to the Earth, causing ocean tides so severe that it would have drowned everything on land twice a day. Again, I think I didn't mention it here, but Kent doesn't really understand tides. He has some idea about tides with during the flood, and all of that's wrong. So my take on this statement is it would take 1,000 years for a layer of moon dust about a millimeter, 0.04 inches thick to accumulate. The researchers found 0.24 inches in 6,000 years. So, pretty much what Kent was saying. Astronauts found about 1 to 2 inches of moon dust. Kent was saying that they found a half an inch. I think it was more than that. The moon was about 20 to 30,000 kilometers from the Earth when it formed. Any closer and the Earth's gravity would pull it apart. So the moon started a distance away from the Earth, and it's been slowly moving away due to tidal forces that slow down the orbit of the moon around the Earth. So the moon is moving away from the Earth currently about 3.8 centimeters per year. That doesn't say how it was 6,000 years ago or whatever, because as the moon was closer, the gravitational pull of the moon would be stronger. So that would cause the tides to be different. So that it likely was moving way slower years ago, and now it's moving 3.8 centimeters per year. The Earth's rotation is also slowing down. So 100 years from now, the day will be 2 milliseconds longer than it is now. 2 whole milliseconds. It will take 15 billion years for the moon to reach its final orbit. The moon is not going to disappear. It's going to go out until the tidal forces are kind of equaled out, and then it may start moving back. Kent's idea is that he can show with calculations and a graph that if the moon were older than 1.4 billion years, that it would crash into the Earth. That could be true if you use the 3.8 centimeters per year. However, I have seen graphs. I can show you where they are if you're interested in that. If the rate was a little bit less, more like 2 centimeters per year, the moon would crash in about 4.5 billion years. So, I think it's a little questionable whether this is Kent's problem. One of the things, he says is that 1.4 billion years, even though it's more than 6,000, it's less than 4.5 billion. So he's showing that science is wrong. It's younger. But he doesn't show that it's 6,000 years. All he's doing is trying to discredit the scientists. About tides, the last couple of bullets here, some tides in the past may have been enormously higher than they are today. A difference between low tide and high tide of 10 to 20 feet instead of 3 to 6 meters. Currently, the average is about 3 to 6 feet. Remember that the Earth's surface was very different millions of years ago. So, the tides would have been very different, affecting the continents very different. So I think it's impossible to say from looking at out here what it was like 1 billion years ago. Okay, the next thing is comets. As comets travel through space, they continually shed some of their material. And you all know that comets have a tail that points away from the sun, and it's because the solar wind is blowing off material from the comet as it orbits. So any comet more than 10,000 years old would have long since disintegrated into nothing. This is Kent's theory again. So let's take a look at Halley's Comet. This is the most famous of comets. Some of you may have seen Halley's Comet. Depends. Halley's Comet is classified as a periodic or short period comet. It returns every 74 to 79 years. So if you're lucky, you'll see it once during your life. So Halley, according to scientists, has been in its current orbit for 16,000 to 200,000 years, although it's not possible to numerically integrate its orbit for more than a few tens of apparitions, and close approaches before 837 AD can only be verified from recorded observations. But they do have observations. They have calculations. They've done the backwards predicting, and but they have observations that verify several of those. Recent work suggests that Halley will evaporate, or it might split in two, within the next few tens of thousands of years, or will be ejected from the solar system within a few 100,000 years. So there are different theories based on who you talk to. In any case, this doesn't match Kent's 10,000 years they'll disintegrate. Observations by D.W. Hughes suggest that Halley's nucleus has been reduced in mass by 80 to 90% over the last 2,000 to 3,000 revolutions. And you can multiply that out for 74 years. And let's see how long it's... so it says the comet has had 2,300 previous close passages of the sun and will probably disappear within 2,300 more. So again, not the 10,000 years that Kent is saying. Let's see. I think I'm going the wrong way. Okay, the next thing is the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker, Kent says, and at the rate of that it's weakening, no such field would exist if the Earth were as old as evolutionists believe. Yes, the Earth's magnetic field is weakening currently. Also, the magnetic North Pole is migrating eastward. So there are changes being made in the magnetic field of the Earth. The second bullet says there's been speculation that we're about to experience a magnetic polar reversal or excursion, they call it, says Richard Holm, co-author of this study. Researchers modeled the geomagnetic field between 30 and 50,000 years ago. Their aim was to examine the two most recent geomagnetic excursions, the last camp, which occurred about 41,000 years ago, and Mono Lake, which occurred around 34,000 years ago. The team found that the magnetic field at those times looked nothing like it does today, indicating that the current changes aren't warning signs of any impending excursion or reversal. The current weakened field will recover without such an extreme event. Lately, again, Kent has been saying that you cannot say that the Earth's magnetic field has reversed based on the mid-ocean ridges, and I hate to tell you, Kent, but that's not the only data that they have. There's also data from naturally occurring magnetic rocks, such as magnetite, that come up in volcanoes and harden. So they have a magnetic field when they are spewed out, and that magnetic field hardens. So you can tell what the Earth's magnetic field was at the time that the volcano occurred. So there are lots of different ways to get data, Kent, not just your favorite. The next one, the Earth's rotation is slowing at a rate of 1,000th of a second per day. At this rate, 1 billion years ago, it would have been spinning so fast that centrifugal force would have caused it to fly apart. As we said earlier, it's not that much. We can use extremely accurate atomic clocks to measure exactly how much the rotation is slowing down. 100 years from now, a day will be about 2 milliseconds longer than today. 2 milliseconds is 1/500th of a second. That's 1,000th of a second in 50 years. And Kent, you said 1,000th of a second per day. I think you're a little off here. The Earth is slowing at a rate of 4.7 times 10 to the minus 4 miles per second every 100 years, and this is, as we said earlier, is due to tidal forces of the moon. So if you look at the circumference of the Earth around the equator, 40,075 kilometers, so the speed of rotation 250 million years ago at the equator would have been about 1,750 kilometers per hour, or about 1,092 miles per hour. The current speed is about 1,040 kilometers per hour. So it has slowed down by 50 miles per hour in 250 million years. Let's see if we can get... Okay, petroleum, this is Kent's theories now. Petroleum in the ground is under tremendous pressure. The rocks that contain it are porous. If the oil had been there for millions of years, the pressure would have dissipated long ago. Again, that's totally not true. I live in New Mexico, which is a big oil production state. There are a few times when oil is under such pressure that when drilling they get a gusher. And so if you hear some of the old movies, they'd talk about getting a gusher, you know. And usually oil has to be pumped out using an artificial extractor, such as the pump seen here. And you can see these oil pumps all over Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. Under high pressure and temperature, the oil of clay shales can be squeezed out and into porous rock. In porous rock, the oil can travel until it reaches an impervious barrier such as a salt dome. Part of his theory is the oldest living plants. He says the bristlecone pine and coral reefs go back about 4,500 years. If the Earth had existed for millions of years, why aren't there older plants still alive? There are two species of bristlecone pine. The record for the oldest individual tree is 5,060 years old. This would in itself refute a worldwide flood some 4,000 years ago. Now, a coral reef is composed of tiny coral polyps held together by calcium carbonate skeletons of dead corals. Age of the reef is not the age of the individual. Okay, so these two things are long-lived plants. And these are individuals, the way we've stated them here. There are longer-lived organisms. There are trees that are, I think, like aspen trees that are like a whole colony cloned from one tree, and they're all together. The roots are all one root system. And so you can look some of that up if you want. They're much older than this 5,000 years. Why aren't there older plants? Maybe it's because bristlecone pine didn't evolve until 5,000 years ago. Did you think about that? Same with the coral reef. You don't know when the reef is that has started growing. So the age of the reef is not the age of the individual, and so you can't look at the whole reef and say, oh look, there's, we have a coral polyp that lived 5,000 years ago. Okay, so according to the Bible, and this is Kent's timeline, Adam lived 930 years, Methuselah 969, Noah 950. Why aren't there living humans that age, this 5,000 years old? Humans are individual creatures just like the bristlecone pine. Flora and fauna, us included, are generally have an innate lifespan, and it's specific to the environment they live in. So bristlecone pine, the reason it lives to 5,000 years because it's isolated, lives on mountaintops in a dry climate. So that's why they can live that long. Some of the ones that have died recently has been because some idiot person killed it. If you're wondering why they don't live longer. Someday we'll have to do another study on these ages of humans. If you're interested. Okay, next one is ocean salt. Now at 3.8%, the salinity of the oceans would have been much greater. at the present rate of increase points back to a beginning about 6,000 years ago. I believe that's incorrect. I guess I need one of those buzzers, huh? Is the ocean becoming saltier? It's not. Salinity in the ocean is in a steady state condition, which means it's not increasing, it's not decreasing very much. Because the amount of salt added, which is input from sources, equals to the amount of salt removed, output to sinks, to other places. So the ocean is approximately in chemical equilibrium. Proportion and amounts of dissolved solids remain constant. It's known as the steady state ocean. And this study at the University of Dallas, the University of Texas at Dallas has much more information, and there's the link. Okay. Evolutionists point to stalactites in caves as a proof of old Earth. But there are stalactites in the basement of the Lincoln Memorial, several feet long, that have grown in less than 100 years. Well, Kent, again, I live in New Mexico, close to Carlsbad Caverns, and I used to work there, so I know a lot about the caverns. The only references that I could find regarding speleothems and the age of the Earth are all creationist. Evolutionists are biologists and do not study geology. Carlsbad Caverns, again nearby where I live, have been radioactively dated to 4 to 6 million years. The age of the stalactites, and they have big ones and small ones and curly ones and, different kinds. Remember, you may not have heard, but stalactites hold tight to the ceiling, so they're the ones that hang down. Stalagmites are the ones on the ground that might reach the ceiling. So that's how you tell them apart. So the ages of these speleothems are affected by temperature, by the amount of carbonic acid, the source, and the amount of calcium carbonate, and the rate of water flow. So all of these and more affect the growth rate of these speleothems. And so you cannot point to some Lincoln Memorial or some person with a spigot that has a stalactite growing from it. Those don't count because you haven't taken into effect temperature, amount of carbonic acid, amount of calcium carbonate, and the rate of water flow. That is different. It's going to be different in Carlsbad Caverns, in other caverns in New Mexico. It's going to be different in Mammoth Caves in Kentucky or wherever you might want to look. So these stalactites, stalagmites, all these things cannot be used to dictate how old the Earth is. So there's that. And the last thing Kent says is the evidence continues to accumulate, exposing the evolutionists' erroneous assumptions. There are 11 points here, and every one are major erroneous. I don't know what Tuesday's video was, but what I'm wondering is how can one person, Kent Hovind, be so patently wrong and yet so many people follow him? It just blows my mind. Most, if not all, of these erroneous statements did not come from Dr. Whack-A-Mole's science or research, because he doesn't know how to do science or research, but they're copied directly from creationist literature. So sometimes if you look for something that he said in a video, if you'll go Google that, you'll find it on, Answers in Genesis, or Creation Ministries International, whatever. So it seems to me that most of the erroneous assumptions come from creationists. And if you want to prove me wrong on that, please prove me wrong. And that's all I have today, I think. Sorry for the lights going out. I've been having battery problems, so we'll see you the next video. I have one cooking that I'd like to get out this week, but may not.